Carter knew they were watching him before he even stepped off the shuttle. Not just watching, but tracking through lens flicks, pheromone shifts, whispered clicks, and languages his translator hadn't finished syncing with. First human ever admitted to Galactic Unity Academy, and already filed under Deathworlder, handle with caution. He straightened his collar and limped slightly as he walked, the after effects of a microfracture he'd earned slipping on a frozen cargo ramp back home. Of course, back on Earth, that had barely rated a wince. Here, it was another reason for the instructors to whisper about his fragility. He didn't flinch when the blue security drone paused in front of him and scanned his vitals for the third time. Didn't flinch when someone muttered "Softworlder" behind him, even though that wasn't even correct. And he didn't flinch when he caught Instructor Halvek watching him from the upper platform, 4 massive arms crossed and eyes cold with the quiet contempt of someone who'd already decided the human didn't belong here. Great, Carter thought. First day, and someone's already picking the fight I haven't started yet. The campus was built in concentric tiers, a giant ring like a centrifuge half sunk into the lunar soil of Ekar 3. Species from across 6 sectors walked or slithered or drifted across the polished, pressure-sealed corridors. Gravity modulation pads buzzed faintly underfoot, adapting to each species' physiological needs. The translators stitched together a web of babble, some voices flat, some musical, some a bit too close to insect chatter, until Carter tuned them all out. He kept to himself. That was the plan. Stick to coursework, don't mouth off, don't prove anyone's prejudice is right. The instructors watched him too closely. The students talked too softly when he passed by. The word Deathworlder got said a lot, but never to his face. It hung in the air like smoke from a fire no one claimed responsibility for. By the second week, he was ahead in astrophysics and galactic politics, holding pace in unified history, and surviving the biocomp physiology module, despite being the only student with an actual endoskeleton. He even got an approving nod from Professor Keelix during a heated ethical debate on non-intervention doctrine, but it never lasted. The second someone saw his test scores, it was always, of course, humans are built for chaos, like he'd cheated by existing. Then came the combat rotation. Mandatory for all cadets. Instructor Halvik had boomed during orientation. Basic field readiness. You will not graduate until you can at least stand through a non-lethal exchange. Carter had done martial arts back home. Not competition, just self-defense. Nothing flashy, no belts or trophies. Mostly grapples, positioning, the kind of human tricks that worked when you were slower or smaller or had fewer limbs. What Halvik taught was different. The Jorvaxian stood over 9 feet tall, 600 kilograms of combat-trained exomuscle, 4 arms, one holding a data spear even during lectures. His classes were demonstrations of dominance, not skill dominance. He made his students run full contact drills until they threw up, replayed their slowest mistakes on the public holoscreen, mocked, jeered, corrected with scathing disdain. And he hated Carter, openly. It wasn't immediate, but by the 4th session, Carter noticed how Halvik called on him twice as often, paired him with larger opponents, made subtle digs in front of the class. Ah, yes, the Deathworld boy. Let's see if terrestrial gravity helps him dodge this week. The students laughed, but not always meanly. Some watched Carter with concern. A few, especially the Avri, light-boned and feathered, looked almost apologetic. Then came the demonstration match. It was supposed to be a routine rotation, instructor versus cadet, to show proper counters under pressure. Normally, the safety fields were on. Impact dampeners, neural feedback buffers, the usual. But that morning, Carter stepped into the arena and something felt wrong. No hum from the dampeners, no shimmer of shielding. The restraints normally ready to auto-lock if someone lost control were visibly offline. Carter met Halvik's gaze across the ring. The instructor wasn't smiling. He didn't have to. "You may proceed," Halvik said, voice calm, almost bored. "Cadet Carter will face me in a controlled demonstration. No weapons, no enhancements, just instinct. Show them what Deathworlders are made of, or show them how they squeal." 3 classes were watching from the gallery, over 100 students. Not a word was spoken. Carter's heart thudded once. He raised his hand. Instructor, are the safety systems not online? Halvik shrugged. Do you need them, Deathworlder? That was it. Carter took position in the circle. No stance, just ready. Halvik moved first. Not a feint, not a test strike. A real blow, fast and low, the shock pike coming out of nowhere, hissing at full charge. Carter dropped under it, rolled left, came up inside the instructor's reach. Strike 1, elbow joint. Dislocate, not shatter. Halvik's lower right arm, spasmed, dropped. Strike 2, outer hand. Cracked 2 fingers before the grip could reform. Strike 3, upward torque against the inner wrist. Snap. Halvik dropped the weapon. It all took less than 3 seconds. Carter stepped back, breathing fast, chest burning. Halvik stared at his mangled limbs. The class didn't speak. Not even the air vents hummed. A single Avery, in the upper row, leaned forward in her seat, feathered crest trembling. Medical, someone muttered finally. Call, medical. Halvik didn't move. He just turned and walked stiffly out of the circle, his expression unreadable. Carter didn't follow. He didn't even look at the other students. He just waited until he was dismissed without fanfare, without acknowledgement, then left the training hall with his hands shaking. That night, his knuckles swelled up. It wasn't broken, he was pretty sure. Just strain. Still, he wrapped it the way his dad had taught him, sat in his bunk, icing it with a thermal gel pack, and stared at the ceiling for an hour before sleeping. Or trying to. The next morning, his name blinked on the dorm room's message screen. Summons. Office of Principal Drexar. Report immediately. He almost didn't go. But he did. Principal Drexar was a tall, armored Threxian with layered metallic plates and soft, jelly-like eyes that belied her otherwise imposing frame. Her office was angular and minimalist, but smelled faintly of ozone and disinfectant. Sit, she said, gesturing with a lower appendage. Carter sat. You're here because of the incident with Instructor Halvik. Carter folded his hands. I defended myself. She ignored that. There are political implications. Instructor Halvik is a decorated veteran of 3 border conflicts. He trains elite candidates for diplomatic protection squads. You embarrassed him, in front of multiple classes. He attacked me. You will apologize, Drexar said, voice flat. Tomorrow morning, in front of the academy. A formal statement of regret. Carter stared at her. No. Her eyes narrowed. You don't understand how things work here. He stood up, slowly, carefully. Neither do you. Drexar said nothing, just stared, her hands folded tightly. As Carter turned to leave, she added, Think carefully. The Academy does not tolerate disruptions. You're not untouchable just because you're an ambassadorial novelty. He paused at the door. I'm not here to be untouchable. I'm here to learn, but I won't be your scapegoat. The door closed behind him. Word spread fast. By afternoon, the whole campus knew about the assembly scheduled for the next day. Some expected Carter to be expelled. Some expected a tearful plea. Some expected a fight. He didn't sleep that night. And his knuckles still hurt. Carter stood behind the curtains of the assembly hall stage, heart drumming so hard it felt like it echoed through his ribs. The pain in his hand had dulled to a steady throb, not serious, but enough to remind him that whatever anyone else thought, that match hadn't been a stunt. He'd been attacked, plain and simple. And now he was about to be made an example again. The auditorium had been modified overnight. Rows of tiered seats adjusted for multi-species attendance. Climate zones partitioned in careful bubbles. Dry heat for the Krelix, cold mist for the Avri, a breathable toxin mix for the Verdari. Drexar hadn't spared effort. Every instructor, every cadet, every staff member had been summoned. Carter peeked through the edge of the curtain. Halvik was there, seated off to the side of the stage, one of his arms bound in a sleek immobilization splint that wrapped from elbow to fingertip. Medical grade. Expensive. He wore no expression, but his eyes, all 6 of them, followed Carter like lasers. To the right, the Avri delegation fluttered in tight formation. One of them, small frame, soft gold feathers, caught Carter's gaze and dipped her head once. That was Lycie. They'd spoken maybe twice. She'd always seemed nervous around larger species, but she hadn't looked away during the fight. At the center podium stood Principal Drexar, imposing in dark red ceremonial armor, the Academy seal glowing at her chest. Her voice echoed through the comms system. This assembly is called to address a breach of decorum and protocol in the combat training arena. While training simulations are intended to challenge and instruct, they must never become displays of personal aggression or humiliation. Carter exhaled once through his nose. That part wasn't directed at Halvik. It was a preamble, a buffer, optics. "Cadet Carter," Drexar said, turning slightly toward the curtain. "Please step forward." A moment passed. He felt every eye in the building lock onto the edge of that curtain. He stepped out. The stage lights weren't bright, but the heat under them was worse than expected. Or maybe it was just the nerves. The silence in the hall was suffocating. No whispers, no shifting chairs. Even the Varnick, who normally clicked to each other at random intervals, were still. Carter approached the podium but didn't touch it. Drexar waited for a beat, then said, "This is your opportunity to make a statement, cadet." Carter glanced at her, then past her, to Halvik. He didn't linger, just long enough to show he wasn't afraid. He cleared his throat, quietly. "I was ordered to apologize." Murmurs stirred. Drexar's gaze snapped toward the crowd, silencing them without a word. "But I won't, because I didn't provoke that fight. I didn't escalate it, and I didn't choose it. I was brought into an arena with the safety fields disabled, against an armed instructor twice my size. That wasn't a lesson, it wasn't protocol, it was a trap." He took a breath, felt the burn in his chest and the weight of every second. "I was attacked. I defended myself. I didn't try to win, I just tried to stay conscious. I have the right to defend my dignity, and I would do it again." The room didn't erupt. There was no immediate applause. For a long, taut moment, no one moved. Then, from the back of the room, someone clapped. Once, twice, slow, deliberate. Lisi the Avri had stood up, her crest slightly raised in a show of approval that was rare for her species. The sound drew a ripple. One by one, others followed. Not everyone, but a lot more than Carter expected. A pair of Fendari twins clicked their upper digits against their shell plates, the Fendari equivalent of a respectful nod. A Harkari student emitted a whistling note of affirmation. Even a Varnick, their faces unreadable as always, inclined their head the barest degree. Carter stepped back. Drexar said nothing for several seconds, her face unreadable. "Very well," she said at last. "The statement is recorded." The meeting was adjourned without ceremony. He walked off stage slowly. The knot in his stomach hadn't loosened yet. When he passed Halvik, the instructor met his gaze briefly. And maybe something shifted. Not remorse, not even respect, but a crack in the mask, recognition. 3 days later, the combat training schedule was overhauled. All future demonstrations required dual observers from the ethics board. Safety fields became mandatory, non-negotiable. Instructor autonomy was no longer absolute. Quiet changes, but very real ones. Carter wasn't named in the revisions. Halvik wasn't either. Officially, Halvik had volunteered for reassignment to a logistics outpost on Sayel 7. Unofficially, word got around. He was removed after internal review, with instructional judgment concerns cited. Most students heard that and nodded silently. No one cheered. Drexar never apologized, and Carter didn't expect her to. The following week, a new message appeared in his inbox. This one was from the Student Council, a neutral invitation to join a cross-species dialogue group focused on academy policies and safety. Optional, but highly encouraged. He accepted, slowly. In one of the first meetings, Lisi sat beside him. She didn't say much until the end. "You were shaking," she murmured. Carter blinked. "During the speech?" "No. After the fight?" He nodded. "Yeah. I was scared. I didn't think Deathworlders got scared." He smiled, barely. "They do. They just try not to show it." She tilted her head. "That's not a weakness. You were brave." I was cornered. That's when it counts the most. Over the next 2 weeks, life returned to a version of normal. Mostly, a few instructors kept their distance. Some were more cordial. A handful looked at him differently, like they'd misjudged a species and were recalibrating. The students, though especially those from less physically imposing races, started coming up to him after class, asking quiet questions, sharing stories. A Scaran cadet admitted he'd been dreading his next training rotation. A Verdari confessed that she always thought humans were reckless, until now. One Varnik handed him a stone-carved token, not explaining what it meant, just saying, "You held your ground." Carter didn't feel like a hero. He didn't want to be one. But the whispers stopped. No one called him fragile anymore. One afternoon, he was back in the medical suite. Not for himself, just accompanying Lacey after a minor sprain from a zero-gravity simulation mishap. While the medic patched her up, he found himself staring at the display screen across the wall. It looped through muscle scan diagnostics, fracture types, ligament tears, burn depths. Carter recognized too many of them. Some he'd experienced. Some he'd seen on Earth, on friends, on rescue workers. The med officer glanced at him. "Something on your mind, cadet?" Carter hesitated. "I'm just thinking about how far we can push things before someone gets broken." The medic studied him, then shrugged. "That's the job of institutions like this, to find the line and stay on the right side of it. Sometimes they don't." The medic nodded. "Then sometimes, someone like you has to remind them." Carter looked down at his hand. It had healed, no swelling now, still sore sometimes, but functional. He flexed it once, then closed it gently into a fist. 2 weeks after the assembly, Carter found himself in the Academy's auxiliary gym at twilight hours, stretching with deliberate care. Not training, not really. Just movement. Controlled, quiet, deliberate. The Academy's schedule had returned to its pre-incident rhythm, but the tension hadn't entirely drained from the air. It simply settled deeper, like sediment after a storm. A few other students milled in the distant corners of the gym, Avery gliding through balance drills, a duo of Scarans testing new neural sync bands. No one approached Carter. Not out of fear anymore, but something more delicate. As if they weren't quite sure what to do with someone who'd refused to back down and hadn't shattered because of it. He rolled his shoulder, wincing slightly. The soreness was stubborn. During a follow-up med scan, the technician had confirmed minor inflammation in the ligaments, not surprising, after redirecting a 2-ton Jorvaxian without padding or restraints. He'd been prescribed anti-inflammatories and a rest protocol. No heavy strain, not for another 4 weeks. He stuck to it. In a place like this, where reputations traveled faster than transport shuttles, he couldn't afford another injury. If he broke now, even in private, the rumors would return. Worse, this time. They'd say, the human cracked under pressure, that even Deathworlders had limits and that his had already been reached. So he was careful, not cautious, intentional. He had started attending the dialogue forums too, not because he wanted to be the face of anything, but because he'd seen what happened when no one spoke. The small things began to matter. How training pairings were assigned, who got dismissed early from feedback sessions, which species were given full body armor during simulation drills and which weren't. The changes were subtle, but visible, and some people didn't like them. "I don't get it," Jerry said, stabbing his stylus through a data plate sandwich as they sat in the Edge Corner Cafe. "You didn't do anything wrong. Everyone saw it. Why are you still in all these meetings and panels?" Carter looked up from his e-book, shrugging. "Because that's how you make sure it doesn't happen again." The Verdari cadet tilted his head, spirals of breathing gills fluttering. "But isn't that exhausting?" "It is. But you're doing it anyway." Carter didn't answer right away. He watched 2 second-year students pass by, whispering to each other without the urgency or discomfort that had followed him in the early days. That whispering didn't feel hostile anymore, just curious. "I'm not trying to prove anything," he said at last. "But if the price of dignity is that you have to keep showing up, even when it's uncomfortable, then I'll keep showing up." Jerry was quiet for a while. Then, quietly, "We've never had a human here before, but I think you're changing how a lot of people see your kind. I'm not here to represent all of Earth. You don't have to. Just yourself is making a pretty big impact." Carter gave a short, tired laugh and took another bite of his synthetic protein wrap. "Let's hope that's enough." It wasn't all political, though. That was the surprising part. When the staff finally allowed Halvik's replacement to begin advanced rotation classes, there was nervous anticipation. But the new instructor, a stony-faced Talari named Omven, brought an entirely different energy. He didn't yell, he didn't humiliate, he analyzed. And on the first day of his class, he did something unexpected. He asked Carter to demonstrate. Not to fight, to teach. Explain how you redirected a heavier opponent's force using minimal physical leverage, Omvin said, in front of the entire session. Carter hesitated. You want me to explain it? Omvin nodded. Not everyone here has bones as dense as yours, cadet. Not everyone has a musculature designed for high gravity, but everyone here has a center of mass. There were murmurs from the seats, a few skeptical glances. But Carter stood. Quietly, he stepped into the center of the mat, motioned for one of the Krelix students, a tall, double-jointed species, to join him. He spoke as he moved. Calm, instructional, no flourish, just steps, anchoring, pivoting, how timing mattered more than strength, how committing to a move too early gave away your balance, how absorbing momentum was often safer than resisting it. Omvin let it run for 20 minutes, no interruptions. At the end, the class applauded. Not the dramatic kind, but respectful, solid. Later that day, 3 students requested to review the footage for study credit. One requested to train under Carter directly. He declined, gently. I'm not an instructor, I'm just a cadet. Still, the request was noted, especially by the administration. Carter's next visit to Principal Drexar's office was unexpected. This time, she didn't summon him. He asked for the meeting himself. She accepted within minutes. Her office hadn't changed, neither had she, except perhaps for the way she looked at him now, no longer evaluating him like a curiosity under glass. You requested an audience, Drexar said, folding her heavy arms. Proceed. Carter stood firm. I want to suggest a permanent adjustment to the combat training evaluation process. Go on. Cross-species partner logs, monitored pattern of assignment, mandatory cooldown and exit interviews after high-risk drills, and medical oversight that's allowed to override instructor authority in cases of suspected endangerment. Drexar's brow ridge creased. You believe Halvek's incident is likely to repeat? I believe that if it does, and no safeguards are in place, someone could be seriously hurt. Someone smaller, slower, someone without my luck. There was a pause. You still carry that incident heavily, Drexar said. I carry what it meant, he replied. Not just for me, for the others who might not get a second chance. She was quiet for a long time, then nodded. I will forward the recommendations. You may be called to testify before the ethics board. That will bring scrutiny. I can handle it. I believe you can. 3 days later, the new policies were announced. Soft launch, no fanfare, just a quiet update to the cadet handbook. New field protocols, new observer roles. Instructor discretion now subject to review. No one mentioned Carter's name. He preferred it that way. But late that evening, someone left a message on his terminal. It wasn't signed, just a still image of the training arena, the safety fields glowing faint blue, and a simple message, "We see you." There were no more fights, at least none like the one with Halvek. Still, Carter kept training carefully, slowly, within the limits of recovery. He followed the protocols the Academy itself had once ignored. He kept showing up, for every panel, every session. Every conversation that started with, "You don't have to answer this," but he stayed. Because staying was the real stand. And in the quiet spaces between those moments, something remarkable began to happen. Respect not loud, not theatrical, began to take root. From the Verdari who practiced his wristlock technique, from the Varnik who asked about Earth-soil structure, from the Avri, like Lissi, who now volunteered in mixed-species training without trembling. Carter hadn't come to Galactic Unity Academy to become anything more than a student. But sometimes, being a student meant refusing to stop learning, even when the lesson was about pain, or fear, or integrity. Especially then. Carter blinked against the bright sun lamp filtering through the upper atrium dome, his boots echoing across the polished hallway floor. Finals week had arrived. The Academy was tense in that uniquely quiet way, everyone either buried in data charts or pacing while muttering equations. Even the ever-chattering Fendari twins had gone silent for the first time in memory. He passed a pair of Avri students hunched over an astrophysics holomap, their feathers twitching in concentration, One gave him a subtle nod as he walked by. Another Scaran saluted him awkwardly, with the wrong hand, but Carter returned the gesture anyway. There were no more stares, no more muttered Deathworlder labels like he was some exotic threat. Now it was just Carter, a cadet, not famous, not forgotten, but seen in the way that mattered. His datapad buzzed softly. Notification: Academy Records Update Halvek Inquiry Resolved. He tapped it open. The notice was brief, unembellished. Following internal review, Instructor Halvek's conduct during the Carter demonstration incident has been recorded as an ethical violation. The instructor has been permanently reassigned to non-combat roles within the Intersector Resource Division. All cadets previously under Halvek's combat rotation have been offered additional sessions under new oversight. No mention of Carter, no credit, no blame, and no apology. He shut the pad off without a word. That same evening, he joined his final Unified Ethics seminar. Half the students were bleary-eyed from last-minute cramming, a few even napping upright. The lecturer, a stern Verdari scholar with the speech cadence of a funeral drone, read through the exam questions without inflection. But midway through, he paused. "One scenario remains," he said, antennae flexing slightly. "It's not graded. You may answer or decline. It is hypothetical, but relevant." The class sat straighter. The instructor continued. "A cadet is ordered to apologize for surviving an unethical training situation. The cadet refuses. The refusal sparks institutional change, yet earns no formal recognition. Was the cadet's action selfish or necessary? And, in a multi-species system where values differ, who decides what dignity truly is?" Silence. No one moved for a while. Then a voice from the back, Lisi. Quiet but steady. "Necessary." The instructor's eyes tracked slowly across the room. "And why?" "Because even if no one else knows what dignity means for your species, you still do." There was a murmur of assent. The instructor tapped once on his lectern, satisfied. No further commentary needed. That weekend, Carter finally accepted Jerry's invitation to attend the campus gardens, a dome he'd always avoided. Too open, too many people, but now it felt appropriate. Rows of alien flora lined the paths. Heavy, vine-like trees with gill blossoms from Tharnex 4, drifting spores from Celiate marsh worlds, and even a struggling section of earth plants, dusty tomatoes, lemon balm, basil drooping slightly under the artificial UV. Lisi met them at the center pavilion, along with 2 other students from the dialogue committee. Someone had brought snacks. Carter didn't know who. But he recognized the gesture, casual companionship, unspoken thanks. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, watching as a pair of Verdari students tried to imitate human juggling using floating seed pods. Eventually, Lisi turned to him. "Do you miss it?" she asked. He raised an eyebrow. "Earth?" She nodded. "Yeah, a lot," Carter said, staring at the stunted tomato plant. "But I don't regret being here." Jerry leaned back on his elbows, watching the spore trees sway. "Do you think you'll come back next term?" Carter hesitated. Not because he didn't know, but because the question meant something different now. "I will," he said. "Because if I don't, the next kid they single out might not have a chance." "You don't have to be the shield for everyone else," Lisi said, gently. "I'm not," Carter replied. "But I'm not going to pretend none of it happened. I made it through. Others should get that chance too." A quiet settled in again, this time easier. In the final week before break, Carter received a private message. Sender, Omvin. Cadet Carter. I have submitted a nomination for you to serve as peer mentor in next term's Interspecies Combat Integration Program. If accepted, you will assist in the development of new cadets, including demonstration drills, cultural safety briefings, and supervision of physical dynamics involving diverse physiologies. This position is voluntary, but I would consider it a benefit to the program if you accepted. Instructor Omven. Carter reread the message twice, not because he was unsure, but because it hit differently than he'd expected. Not punishment, not scrutiny, an invitation. The next day, he accepted. His last visit before the break was to the medical bay. Dr. Murtha, the half-retired human specialist brought in after the Halvek review, gave him a long look before scanning his shoulder and wrist. She didn't rush, she didn't need to. Her bedside manner was Earth standard, direct, blunt, but kind. "You still favor the left side when lifting," she noted. "Only with heavy strain. Inflammation's gone, scarring minimal, joint mobility normal, but the tendons aren't at full tensile strength yet. 4 more weeks before any explosive pressure. I've got time." Dr. Murtha tapped her scanner against the console. "You did more than hold your own. That injury should have left you out of rotation for 2 months. You followed the protocols?" "Every single one." She nodded. "Good. You're not unbreakable, Carter, but you're aware of your limits. That matters more." Before he left, she handed him a data chip. "What's this?" "The training footage, the one from the Halvik match." "I thought that was locked." "It was, until the review panel closed their inquiry. Now it's educational material. They'll use it in instructor retraining." Carter held the chip between his fingers. "Does it have audio?" "Yes." He didn't ask what he sounded like. He didn't want to know. Not yet. He slipped it into his jacket. The shuttle ride home was quiet. He sat near the middle, next to a sleeping Krellix cadet and a couple of Avri murmuring softly over a shared e-book. Outside, the stars scrolled by, unblinking. He wasn't going back to Earth permanently just for break, but even that felt strange. Home would feel smaller now, simpler, but not easier. Before dozing off, he sent one last message through his terminal. To Principal Drexar, "Thank you for holding the line, even when we disagreed. See you next term." There was no response by the time he landed. He didn't expect one. But when he returned 3 weeks later, stepping off the shuttle onto the chilled plating of the Academy's main causeway, there was a new plaque on the wall outside the training arena. It didn't name anyone. It just read, "Every species deserves a fair fight." Carter walked past it without stopping. He wasn't here to be a hero. He was just a cadet. And that was enough.